We're here to talk about kind of like what to do when the market turns. Obviously, rates, when rates are deflationary, like brokers panic, and there's a lot of things that you can do, a lot of ways to think about investing in the business, and from what we've seen in our careers, and we'll all talk a little bit about what that looks like. So hopefully you're in the right place. We'll do a couple of, so this is our, oh yeah, there we go. Okay, so this is us. Unfortunately, Mark is with us in spirit, but well, why don't we do a couple of quick intros? JR, I'll start with you.
Sure. My name is Jason Roberts. I'm the Senior Vice President of Enterprise Operations for Mode Global. On my side of this, I guess the relevant experience here was part of a full service 3PL cradle to grave called Venture Logistics that grew from 0 to 100 million in 4 or 5 years. Was acquired by Mode Global about 2 years ago. So I've also operated in that startup space, and I've really seen both sides from a small brokerage operation into Mode Global, which is a very large brokerage operation at about $3.5 billion.
Rush Veldhacker. I'm the VP of Development at Neon Logistics. Started my career at a small brokerage called Access American Transport. Navigated a few market cycles there that saw us reach hypergrowth before we sold to Coyote Logistics, where saw us how we navigated market cycles there a little differently. Did some consulting work following that, and now I'm with Neon.
And I'm Ryan Schreiber. I'm the Chief Growth Officer for Metaphora. Metaphora is a consulting company that focuses just in transportation and logistics. So we work with primarily brokers, carriers, freight tech companies. I started my career in industry. I started at Echo Global Logistics right before the company went public, and saw growth there. And then I've started a few brokerages myself over the course of my career. Started 3 different brokerages and exited those in different ways. And I started a tech company before joining Metaphora. And so at Metaphora, we work with companies on growth, on technology, and things like that. And so when I was putting this panel together, I was looking for folks who had seen growth, right? Who had experienced things when they were nascent and they were small, seen things when they were middle market, and seen things when they were at scale. And how we navigated those different market cycles is obviously what I wanted to chat a little bit about today. And so that's the kind of folks that I was looking for at my network as we kind of put this panel together. So quickly, we have to talk about antitrust guidelines, like don't talk about antitrust, things that will get us in trouble with antitrust. And we have Gina in the back there to scream at everybody if that happens. So can't talk about future rate or price fixing, marketing strategies or boycotts of any product or firm. Inhibit employees from discussing employment or stuff like that. So, let's not talk about that stuff or whatever. And then, so we'll get into, that's all for the slides. So just a couple of other housekeeping notes. We got an hour to talk here, so again, sorry for that. But through your app, you can submit questions, and they'll come up here to my little iPad, and we'll kind of check in with that from time to time. I have moderated a bunch of panels. I will tell you that the panel the experience is definitely the best if you have questions, if you submit questions, if you ask them. If you're thinking about it, somebody else in the room is probably thinking about it. So definitely feel free to submit questions. I might not kind of get to all of them, but it'll definitely make the experience a lot less dreary for everyone and whatnot. So with that in mind, we'll talk about. We can kind of start we'll start kind of going through we don't have an agenda really. Anybody who knows me knows I'm just kind of like we're gonna wing it. So when we were talking about this panel internally at Metaphora and putting it together, it obviously came toward the end of last year when rates started to go deflationary, and our customers were spending a lot of time talking about that with us, right? And as we reflected on the market cycles and things, what I started talking to our customers about is that I've always found, and I'd love want you guys to react to this. What I found is that the reactions to the market cycles are interesting to me because as an intermediary, right, like we are in the middle of a transaction by definition. So I have a shipper and I have a carrier, and I'm trying to make a match. And so the focus is always on the shipper, the focus is always on revenue. So, when rates are inflationary, revenue is growing, and that's great, but really the other side of my house is really difficult and really challenging, but people seem to enjoy that part of the cycle because revenue is growing, what have you, even though net operating income is actually probably more difficult to come by than in a deflationary rate environment like we're in. So, what I wanted to start by chatting about is this concept that as an intermediary, really you have two sides of your business. You have capacity and you have you have shipper sales. And regardless of whether you're cradle to grave or buy sell, that's still within it. Those functions still really exist. And so I thought that was relatively interesting. How have you guys kind of, at the different businesses that you've been, kind of see the businesses think about that when they're setting the strategy, either through an inflationary or deflationary environment, or kind of exclusive of what the environment is doing?
So I think when you come to these market trends, these market turns, there's like three schools of thought you'll see brokerages fall into. I think there's those that think the market will change, but they're not maybe positive of that. They keep things very close to the vest, and they wait until maybe they see an up ramp before they make any sort of change. And then the second group is a little less reactive, but they're kind of in the middle of, I believe the market's going to change, and they're still going down their tech roadmap. They're still investing, but maybe not as heavily as they should. And then the other group is the group that you see reach that hyper growth on the up ramps, and that's the one that uses these down ramps to really kind of set the table for what the future's going to look like. And they invest in tech, and they invest in sales, and they get ready because they know eventually that market's going to turn, whether that's 12 or 24 months from now. So that's kind of the difference that I've seen from the companies that have success with market turns versus those that are kind of victims of them.
Jason, I'll put that to you as well, and maybe if you could talk about what I refer to as broker math, right? I mean, we all understand sort of revenue is revenue and gross margin. We all know kind of our gross margin target. When we look at net operating income, right? Most brokerages are in the high 90s OR. That doesn't leave a lot of free cash to invest, like Rush is talking about. So how kind of have you seen maybe some of that play out? And as you kind of talk about what else you've seen in terms of planning?
Yeah, so from a planning aspect, brokerages are traditionally very reactive and not proactive. We are always chasing every side of every market. And most companies usually are not better for that. So when the market is doing really well, we're always behind, and we're always trying to hire as many people as possible, however we can get them in. We usually we sacrifice proper training, we sacrifice proper vetting, onboarding. All of us become kind of shoot ourselves in the foot down the road as a market flattens, or certainly as it turns to a deflationary measure. One of the other things that we also sometimes lose sight of in that environment is the tech that we're employing to make ourselves operationally efficient. It is easy in a what I would call a frothy market environment to sit and not think about how efficient we are today, because we're so much better than we were year over year in a different market cycle. So what I've seen is a lot of times we forget to really invest on the foundational aspects of our business. I mean, we don't concentrate on operational efficiency like we should in an environment where we're performing well. And then separately, in a deflationary market, we panic. We usually cut more fat than we should. We're usually not better for that either, but understandably so. We have to do that a lot of times because maybe we never seem to time the market correctly, and we'll overhire at the tail end of the market cycle, and then we're not better for it again, and we have to make tough decisions a lot of times because of that. And then separately, what we've seen is a lot of times companies hold off on really deploying that operational efficiency software, whether it's internal or external, and processes as a whole. We've seen a lot of that. So, then operationally, right, I think there's a significant shift that has to take place that doesn't always as well. You'll get customers pretty easily, and the only really value prop that I have to have is capacity. And I'm certain that has changed for you today. I'm certain that it's changed for your brokers today. One, us recognizing that they haven't been in that is important. Everyone hasn't seen the ups and downs of this market, and your value proposition as a broker has to change when the market down cycles like it has today. Capacity is no longer king.
You know, one thing I really want to focus, I've been coming to TIA for 12 years, and I credit, or longer than that, but I credit TIA with you know, with really kind of like any success that I've had in my career, to the extent that I've had any. And one of the things that I noticed kind of is sometimes some of these panels, they just kind of talk at you and tell you things you already know, and some of them try and focus on, you know, how to get some of that done. So Rush, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to JR. Like, how should folks think about planning? What are things that they need to look at in terms of setting that course or charting that course, that from what we've seen, what you've seen, that they're not doing today that people should think about implementing in the business?
So I think Jason kind of hit it on the head of people being very reactionary, and the key to having success is investing like now or before you need to. Because if you wait till you start to see an uptick in the market to go and do product selection and start looking to hire, you're going to be behind the times. If you just look at sales, for example, so the market swings and you want to invest heavier in sales. Okay, so you have to find prospects, you have to hire them, you have to train them, and then you probably have 6 months before they're like just fully developed salespeople in that market. And so by that time, you've missed 7 to 9 months of what's a really good market to sell in. And you know, I think a good example right now would be like procurement tech. Capacity is easy to come by. So you know, a company our size, a little less than 100 million, looks at that and it's like, okay, well maybe, you know, we don't need procurement tech because capacity is easy to come by now. But do you remember what it was like 2 years ago? I mean, you couldn't operate off of a load board. We're going to see those problems again. So we need to invest in that type of tech now, so that our team we can integrate it into our system, we can choose the right product for us, we can implement it, and our team can adopt it. So when we do see that big swing in the market, which happens just extremely quick, we're ready to start capturing more capacity than we would have otherwise. If we wait till it already starts to become a problem, then it's too late. And I think everyone in this room that's been in this industry for 5 years knows that that's going to happen again. So it's kind of important to make those decisions now before you think that you need to.
Jared,
Yeah, so one, I do want to just amplify something that Ryan said earlier. You know, please get on the app, ask questions. We're up here to serve you and to answer questions that are relevant to your operation. That is the beauty of this. You know, our goal is not to come up here and tell you that we know better than you, or you know, really just to provide insight as we've seen it. So I did want to just make sure to mention that again. You know, so I think you know, Rush spoke really well to a few points, and I'll kind of shift to an operational mindset that I'll build off of a little bit. So when we say, you know, capacity is no longer the value proposition. So one, it is you know, there's some things that you can do from a tool standpoint, and there's some things that you can do that are free, that just take a little bit of sweat equity. So one of those is, you know, what are you offering your customers today? If it is, you know, by golly, we'll give you great service and good communication at the lowest price, you know, regardless, you know, they've heard that story. You know, so what else can you bring to the table from a value add standpoint? So that's the things that I would be thinking about. It is all about how you can be a differentiator in this marketplace. So what does that mean? Well, look in you know, the marketplace today. What are your customers talking about? What do they care about? What are the words? What are the things that you're hearing that maybe you didn't hear about, you know, a few years ago? If that's, you know, carbon neutrality or net zero or emissions or you know, modality conversion. Those are all things that maybe your customer hasn't thought about. So I would challenge everybody to come to the table, and also the other side of this would be being proactive with your customers. So, you know, QBRs, right? So quarterly business reviews with your customers regardless of size. If I'm in your shoes, I'm voluntarily going to my customers and telling them I want to do that for them. I'm going to give them a rundown of what the market is doing. That's all information that is available to everyone in this room today. I'm going to layer that up against my own data. And then I'm going to hopefully be able to bring some insights to the table that our customer maybe didn't know about. Hey, did you know that you're shipping a ton on Tuesdays and none on, you know, and none on Fridays, and this is actually, you know, costing you X amount in dollars if you were to spread this out because your market is Albuquerque and it's a really small, you know, mid-market area. You're driving up capacity, you know, yourself. I'm going to look at those things, and then separately, I'm going to be tasking my salespeople with a different value prop. Capacity can't be what they're selling today; it has to be everything else. So I'm going to talk to them about how, visibility on their freight. How can I make sure that they're getting that? And then separately, I would look as a whole at understanding where my people are from a qualification standpoint with my customers. So again, that's free to you today. Do you know the size of the customers that you're targeting today? Do you have a customer market vertical strategy at all? Are your people just out there on Google looking up manufacturers? There's some refinement that you can do there that will really help.
Yeah, specificity is what you're talking about there in terms of you, and I think that's really important to talk about. Because it actually tied nicely into the point that I wanted to bring up, which is, regardless of what size brokerage you are, if you define yourself as a small broker, a mid-market broker, or a big broker, our counsels actually don't do anything differently, right? Don't do anything differently regardless of what's happening in the market. So then the question becomes, how do you break the cycle, right? Because if you're in these cycles where you're chasing the next market or this market, what do you do? And so from really getting really tactical about it, it's some of the stuff that we've talked about. Invest in the other thing, right? Invest in what was hard for you before. But there's things that you do in a down cycle market to help make a healthier business that you should also apply in an upcycle market. So JR was talking earlier about talent, right? And we overhire in a bad market and we don't train. And so what does that do? Well, it gets me people who are underperforming because they're not trained. But I'm trapped in this cycle of, but I need bodies, right? But I need bodies, I need somebody who can just hit the floor. And there's material issues that you see on your P&L when that happens, right? Your ramp is slower, so you end up with more people to do the same amount of work. So how do you break that cycle, right? And so especially in a down cycle market, there's more time to do that, to get you out of the I can't fire that low performer right now, even though it's a cancer on that team, because I just need a warm body. And so what you can do in a down cycle market, really just getting, again, tactical on it, is invest in that strategic planning to break the cycle, right? So invest in, do things like, so the first thing that you should do, or that I would recommend that you do a postmortem on what the last upcycle looked like, right? Where were you really struggling? So there's no one answer for that. I mean, Rush talked a little bit about procurement tech a minute ago, and it's an obvious, or that's a good area of investment, because that was probably something that was difficult for you before, and now's the time to get ahead of it. But the first thing you want to do is retro what was really difficult for you before, and then challenge the way that you thought about those things historically. Why was it that way? Don't just look out, don't look outside and say, well, capacity was constrained and therefore we had struggles. Everyone was struggling and therefore we had struggles. Because while we were all in the same ocean, we weren't all on the same boats, right? And some of that has to do with size, but a lot of it has to do with the activities inside the four walls of our business, so also specificity. So one thing that we see a lot is we'll go into a brokerage, and this will happen a lot in buy-sell, but it happens in cradle to grave as well, where the shipper side of the house doesn't have a specific go-to-market target. Why? Well, because we want to grow. We need to grow load volumes, what have you. So they go and they try and get whatever loads they can. They try and get business. Well, the sellers are actually more inefficient at that because they can't articulate a value proposition to shippers, right? And then the carrier function, the procurement function, is so much more inefficient that they're not building liquidity that's going to set them up for long-term success, right? So one thing you can do really tactically right now is do that post-mortem and then charter the values that you're going to stick to through the market cycles to smooth them. You're never going to make it always easy to get customers or always easy to procure freight, but you can apply those same principles regardless. Anything you guys would say about that, or add, subtract?
I think that you kind of hit it on the head of, this is the time in these markets where you can right the ship. because when volumes increase and capacity shrinks and your salespeople are pushing as hard as they can, you're just kind of holding on, right? And then you hit this natural down market, and like, okay, well, yeah, exactly. Post-mortem, what went wrong? And so now's the time where the stress that the carrier reps and the sales reps are feeling in that upcycle, like your executive team should now feel. It's like, okay, what went wrong and what can we do as an executive team to make it better next time? How can we make the next upcycle like hugely beneficial to us and for our people?
I have no idea what I understood with that question, but the question was, what technology should we be thinking about instead of, other than TMS? And this opens the door to where I would talk about data, like tools that help you better capture the data that you need to compete with larger companies, to grow your business, etc. So Rush, one of the things you and I talk a lot about cost to serve, and so again, kind of moving away from quote unquote vanity metrics to metrics that tell a better story about the performance of your business, the performance of your partners, of your folks. You're absolutely right. Rates are deflationary, they're coming down, or when they're coming down rather, right? Being able to have those conversations with the carriers. And it's also really important to understand how cost to serve impacts that, right? So digital behaviors of the carriers that you have, or the effort that it takes to kind of replace the carrier, what service implications there might be when a new carrier that has a lower rate comes into the mix, and then the manual effort that might be associated with that. Those are all things that you should bake into your decision-making process and train your team members on, and then build incentives. And incentive in this concept is more, or in this context, it's always more than money. There are natural built-in positive and negative incentives, right? You were talking about that with not wanting to go back to the carrier and have that hard conversation about their rates. That's an incentive, right? It's not overcome by compensation or something else. And so one thing to really look at is our tools that can help you from a data perspective capture more data, and then be able to leverage that data to make better data-driven decisions on pricing. So that's both to the customer and the carrier, and how your internal teams perform, and on the liquidity in your capacity network, so that you can go to market confidently with customers and actually articulate what you need, what you want, what you have, what you can do, and things like that. And then also on tools that will, and then the other thing I would say are tools that are solving a problem that humans were just throwing humans at, right? So document management, things like that are tools that are must to look at, because we're just throwing people at a problem that really software can solve right now. But definitely avoid, when it comes to technology, really you've got to understand your specific use case. It doesn't matter that it's working for someone else. How does your operating model, how do your team structures, how do your incentive structures going to drive adoption or drive folks away from adoption? I'll use one example and then I'll stop talking, but around procurement tech. A lot of procurement tech right now, the easiest loads for technology to book are the same loads that are easy for people to book. That's potentially why you are not getting the results from procurement tech that you want. If your bounce rates are really high, it might, a carrier books a load digitally and then gives it back. It tells you something about your capacity network. So really understanding who you are, and then going and buying software that's going to be adoptable. That's not the technology vendor's job, that's your job. And so that's definitely something to look at and keep in mind as you're going through this. Josh, I'll let you go first.
No, I think you're exactly right, and something that me and Ryan do talk a lot. He is right most of the time, but something to think about when you're going through this like software procurement process is to make sure that you're buying like the right tech for you. So technology, it's a journey. It's not okay. We have what we need, our tech stack set. Like when you start a brokerage, you probably have a base TMS and maybe your CRM is an Excel sheet. But like as you go through that journey, you're progressively changing, and tech's entering this space so quickly. I think as everyone's seen over the last 5 years. When we just talk about digital tracking, think about where that was 5 years ago and where it is now, and how that's table stakes for this space. But it's really important to maybe if you don't know where you should go for a certain capability. Work with some outside help. I'm not going to plug any companies, but you can holler at Ryan, to find out what might be the best procurement tech for your business, or what might be the best pricing tool for your business. And then as you evolve, you might go from buying off the shelf to maybe building something more proprietary. But it's a continuous journey, and it's important to kind of stay up to speed.
And you need to ask, to go back to that just quickly, you need to ask specific questions about their business, what's made it work, and compare that to your use cases. Again, just because it worked for somebody else doesn't mean it's necessarily going to work for you, because your business is different and unique. Your people are the biggest reason for that. Go ahead.
So in our space in particular, the most valuable tool that you have is beside of you right now. And in this industry in particular, it is always looked at as really closely guarding our information, like some of us are doing something so special and unique and different from the person beside of us that I can't share that with them, because they'll take my customer, even though the largest customer in our industry has less than 1% of the entire market share. So here's the good news. There's millions of customers to choose from. It's okay to collaborate with the people that are in this workspace. That is how we get better. You have to get to a place, find somebody that you can trust, maybe you don't trust yet, but you can get to a place where you have a peer, a cohort, a colleague, a mentor. Connect with those people and talk to each other about what is working well for you, what is not working well for you. And the other thing I would say is there's no need to posture. Everyone's in the same exact market. Yes, people will be performing at different levels, but it's okay to say, hey, it's tough right now. So that's the first bit of advice I would give you, is get somebody that you feel comfortable enough to talk with. Because I'm going to go ahead and make an assumption. Most of your comp structures today, even your decision to be buy, sell versus cradle to grade, that wasn't something you came up with by yourself. I'm almost sure of it. There's only so many of them. There's only so many different models. You probably are doing that because someone else told it to you, or because that was just how you did it when you worked somewhere else. So one, I would start asking myself, why have I structured my organization the way that I have? I would also say, it's okay to be nimble. It's important to pivot quickly if you know something is failing and the issue is not solvable in the short term. So I think that's the other thing, is us admitting when we've made a misstep. And the other thing is, there's a lot of great tech options out there today.
Yeah, you bring up the point about, sorry.
All I was going to say was that there's a lot of great options. It doesn't mean you need them all right now, but there are certain foundational things that you have to have in your tool belt, to make sure that you operate. Again, a TMS is one of those. There's lots of great options. Having some sort of pipeline management system for your customers today. Look, if you're not at least doing that on a spreadsheet, or in general, we talked about those KPI vanity metrics, but what operational efficiency metrics do you have in place for your teams today? Having some sort of establishment is really, again, table stakes for success.
I forget what I was going to say a minute ago, so I'm just going to kind of go like this until I figure it out. So I guess we'll just move on. Anyway, so also, if you're not getting what you want out of this, feel free to submit questions to the app. Also, if you don't have the app or for whatever reason, raise your hand. Troy back there in the pink shirt will run you a microphone since he was late coming into the panel. So I think this is an interesting question that touches on something you were just talking about, which I don't think we should answer this question specifically, because I think there's some of the antitrust things that go on that, but I think it brings up a good point that I think we can talk about. So the question that's on here is, in a down market, is it better to invest in high comp, seasoned sales professionals who need little training and could quickly bring revenues versus lower comp newbies that could, that need training and investment long term to produce? So answering that question specifically is obviously relatively tricky. But what are some of the considerations that should go into how you staff your teams, your organization, and how do you make that decision that's best for your org? Because the reality is it's different for everybody. What are some of those considerations?
That's a really good question. I think that it's kind
It
of
wasn't mine, but thank you.
yeah. So props whoever submitted it. I think on the bringing in seasoned sales folks versus bringing in newer people, I think you have to do both. If the right person falls on your radar, yes, get that person. Don't say we don't have a spot for you. But you need to organically be developing sales talent in your organization. When you bring in new people and you train them your way, you can train them with your habits. And if you bring them from another company, I think we've probably all seen they have some habits that you have to break down and try to build back up, and that could be an issue. When you do that though, don't get blinded by like, oh, I can bring these people in, this is what I've done in the past. Are they a culture fit? You know, if they can come in and bring you like, I don't know, 100K gross margin in a month, that's great, but you know, are they gonna hurt the organization in other ways? So, you know, even if they're a high producer, maybe vet them. And then the newer people, you know, it's great to surround them with people that have had that level of success. They'll naturally learn from it. So
I want to do contracted in quotations. You know, I think that most of you have probably seen what those contracted rates look like in a down cycle, where your customers have probably far more often than not, you know, that annual contract has reduced to a quarterly contract or a, you know, supplemental bid or a retesting of the market. Like, this is the game we all chose to play. It's the world we live in, right? There's the ups and downs of this, and you have to play that. So what I would do if I'm looking at what, you know, what a great problem to have is whether or not to take on that business. But I would look at it and say, one, again, do I know the size of the opportunity that's in front of me? The answer is you won't always, but when I can, I want to know. I want to know the size of the customer, because if I know the size of the customer, I can have an idea of what their freight spend is. If I have an idea of what their freight spend is, then I can probably extrapolate from that whether or not, even with this contracted freight, there may be some transactional spot opportunities. Many people that if you listen, and again, I would say a lot of this trace back the stories. Listen to the stories. People love to tell, salespeople love to talk about how they landed their customers, okay? And you know, I've been on both sides of that. You know, I'm not immune to telling those stories either. But it's important to know, again, how was that customer landed? What was the story? Sometimes it's by accident, sometimes it fell into someone's lap. And then a lot of times it is something where they've strategically chosen, hey, we went in on 2 lanes really, really cheap, because that's what we decided that was a market that we already bought well in, and we knew there was other opportunity, so we were willing, you know, to Ryan's point, to take a risk. Or we took it a step further. We knew we might operate at a loss on this for a while, but we also have to be prepared to say, I got to exit at some point, or there is real opportunity to build.
Well, it's about, like, what you're highlighting is making intention, like shifting from the companies that ride the cycles really aggressively, shifting away from kind of like what happens to making intentional decisions about what you are going to do and having a plan. You don't have to know the answer of what the outcome is going to be if you're going to take a risk, but making an intentional decision to say, we've looked at it, we think that we can accomplish X, and we have a plan to accomplish X, we're going to do these activities, and then be able to and then review that, do that post-mortem that I was talking about earlier, you know, to say, did we do that or did we not, and learn from it, right? The kind of the figure it out mentality is what actually stifles growth at most brokerages. The biggest reason brokerages stop growing is that concept of just, I'm going to take what I can get, and then we're going to go and we're going to hustle and we're going to figure it out. And actually, the opportunity in growth is a more measured approach today can actually set you up for significantly more growth.
So I want to just one thing on that. You know, I think there's a big piece of what he spoke on just then, that was that follow up, and that again that 30, 60, 90, that retrospective, you know, look at whatever it was we said we were going to do. We don't do that enough in this industry. We fail and we move on, and we don't stop to really think about why that happened. Or
the most we use market carrier, do not use, and we move on. Like, that's about it, right? I mean, that's it. We've got 3.5 minutes left, and I hope everybody's these questions are rolling in, so that might mean that we're not talking about things that people really want us to talk about. You know, in this, one question is around kind of motivation and kind of keeping your people engaged. right? As the market kind of shifts into a down cycle, people are going to be making less money this year in most instances, in most scenarios. And so some questions around like how do you keep people motivated? How do you keep your top performers motivated? You want to start with that?
Yeah, I think
Mr. Motivation.
it's about painting the picture. And I think Jason asked the question earlier: how many people have an organization with a lot of salespeople under 2 years of experience? They might think this is the new normal. So it's important to sit them down and show them market cycles and talk about the different strategies in a down market versus an up market. And talk about like, yeah, you're going to be down this year, but if you do the right things and you build the right relationships now on this up cycle, so here's what you can do. Here's where you can be. Here's people in the organization that have gone through this. You should talk to them. This is where this person was. This is where they are now. But if you just have them in a chair and this is what they think the new normal is, it's really like awful. Like they don't think they can make money. They don't know if this is going to be the career path for them.
Yeah, they just don't understand.
Instead of your seasoned vets, they're like, all right, it's a down cycle. Like let's do the right things so I have to make more money on the up cycle. So have one-on-ones with your newer reps and just kind of show them on a chart what the market's done for the last 20 to 30 years. Those curves. I think it's really important that they see that.
You got 1 minute.
All right, 1 minute. One, I'm going to identify the people on the floor. Is their long-term goal to be a salesperson? Is it to be a leader? If it's to be a leader in an organization, I'm going to talk through them about what development looks like and rounding them out from a skill set standpoint. I'm going to use that opportunity. I'm going to make sure that they understand. Here's what you've done really well. Here's the areas, again, recognizing the strengths and weaknesses. Here's how we're going to bolster this weakness side of things. Whether that was operational efficiencies, a lot of cleanup, happens traditionally in these down cycles, right? Typically speaking, people will become more efficient during that period of time, and hopefully, if the right practices are put in place, they'll remain more efficient and again be more prepared for that up cycle for growth. So I would be concentrating on that.
Yeah, I would add 2 things before we wrap up on this point. Number 1 is invest in their career development, like invest in their personal and professional development. Almost like put your money where your mouth is. But it doesn't mean just like stroking them a check for the difference in their commission or whatever, because that's reinforcing the wrong behavior. But invest in their personal and professional development. So I was talking earlier about like advanced skills, advanced training. JR just talked about kind of like leadership development and whatnot. Invest in that for your people and take this opportunity to do that, to show them, hey, listen, we are in this for the long haul. But we're in this together, right? And I'm invested in your long-term success here and elsewhere. The other thing I would actually say is take a look at your compensation program broadly, because Rush was talking a little bit earlier about on the carrier side, if you will, like the concept of getting complacent. If your compensation programs have a built-in negative incentive that, like, at some point, everyone works for their level of income comfort. Is it an immutable law of human beings? At some point, the I don't want to do this anymore incentive, or like it's not worth it for me incentive outweighs the I can make this much more money incentive, right? And that number is different for everyone. And so when you think about compensation-based incentive, you need to make sure that you have a system or a scheme that drives the behavior that you actually want, which is continued growth, and that you're paying people for the activities that they're doing, not paying them for activities that they have done, right? I mean, at some level, like sales is hard. You need to make sure you get people up to, you need to pay them for that and for a time. But if I can coast on that for 10 or 15 years, what am I doing today to make the money? So thanks everybody for coming. Sorry we didn't get to all the questions. And we will get a poll.